Good evening to each and every one of you. Just want to let you know the first question will be a 3-minute response. The subsequent 5 questions will be 2-minute response, and then we'll have a final closing question that will be 3 minutes in response. If you do call out one of the other candidates during one of your responses, that candidate that has been called out will have a 30-second opportunity to rebut anything that has been said. So with that being said, let's get started with our first question. And we will start with candidate Ritter. Why should we care that you want to be the next lieutenant governor? Which of the several duties and roles of the lieutenant governor is the most important in your view? And what makes you a superior candidate in that particular duty or role?
Well, thank you so much, Mr. West. I appreciate you being here. This is such an honor to have you. And so, first of all, to answer, I suppose, the first part of that question, why would you want me to be your next lieutenant governor? I will say that, and why do I care about this particular office or serving in that capacity? Well, one, I do love the state of North Carolina and love the United States. I've been asked what is my foundation, and I will tell you quite simply that first of all, my foundation is faith in God. I love the Lord, and I know that with Him all things are possible. Secondly, I have a wonderful family, and I have a wonderful wife and son, and I have family members here tonight supporting me. My second foundation is my family. And thirdly, foundation is a great love for this wonderful state and nation, and that is from the bottom of my heart. So you would know right out the door that I'm going to do everything I can to uplift this state, to serve the people, and to fulfill the duties of this office. Now, why would I want to serve in this particular office? We do know that the office of lieutenant governor is a little bit more of a quiet platform. It's not a power office like serving as, for instance, governor. And so I will say that actually I believe that I would be well suited to serve in that role because I do not have to have all the glory. I don't have to have all the credit. I'm happy to work tirelessly for the people of this state without any of that. And I know that there'd be a lot of that in this role. So I think that one particular area is the fact that the lieutenant governor serves on the state school board and the state community college board. I am a community college graduate. I went on from Montgomery Community College to the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill and studied journalism, graduated there and became an attorney, graduated from UNC Law School. So I understand how all these systems are connected, and public school graduate. I went to Westmore Elementary and Northmore High School, so I understand the value of public education in North Carolina, and I would like to be a positive influence there to help us go in the right direction. And I think that all of this does connect directly with our economy, and I believe that I could serve to carry on with this great economy we have under President Trump and to utilize what we already have, not spending more money, but spending it more wisely to connect all of these services and offices that we have to provide for the people of this state. And part of my platform is to promote trades education and the great careers that are to be had there for our young people. So I think with that high school and community college connection, the Lieutenant Governor's office would be just a wonderful platform from which to serve the people and to endeavor to do that.
Thank you, Candidate Ritter. Candidate Robinson, same question.
Well, first I'd like to say thank you for being here and thank you for having me here. But I would say the reason why I say people should care that I'm running for Lieutenant Governor is because I am everything that North Carolina represents. I am the common man. I am a person who came from very humble beginnings, and tonight I sit on the stage ready to make history here in North Carolina. That's why I would say people should care. The issue that I think that's most important to North Carolina, and in fact this nation right now that's most important, absolutely, as it comes to Lieutenant Governor, is education. We talk about education. I had the opportunity to talk to a gentleman the other day. He said, why should I care about education? Because I don't have any kids in school and I'm not in school. And I asked him, if you care about the Second Amendment, you should care about education, because our young people now don't appreciate our Second Amendment because they're not being taught our Constitution. If you care about our society as a whole, you should care about education, because currently in education we're indoctrinating our children and teaching them things that are contrary to our Judeo-Christian principles. So anybody in this society should care about education, because education is the root of all the evils that we see arising in this nation now. We haven't taught our children how dangerous communism and socialism is in our schools, and so they're falling into that trap. We're not teaching our children the skills they need to know to be able to have successful careers. So we're falling short of people in being able to fill jobs. So I would say that education is the #1 issue in this seat, in this position, because it has got to be turned around in this state. We have got to stop indoctrinating our children, and we've got to get back to educating our children. We talk about making victors and not victims. That's the #1 way we can do it, by teaching our young people that in this country, victors built this nation, not victims. And it all starts with education.
Thank you. Candidate Stone, same question, 3 minutes.
Well, I want to thank Harnett County GOP for hosting this in Campbell. Fantastic event. It's a pleasure to be here, and let me tell you a little about where I see the role of Lieutenant Governor and where my strengths are. First, there's a lot of different ways that the Lieutenant Governor can have a big impact on this state. It's somewhat of a force of personality position, because there are some duties presiding over the Senate and so forth, which, quite frankly, having been in the House, we know that there could be some good collaboration between the House and Senate. That doesn't always happen as much as it could. And having that background, having been in the House and moving towards the Senate, could be a great asset. But I think one of the things that could be unique in the role of Lieutenant Governor is economic development. If you look at where the governor gets involved, where the Secretary of Commerce gets involved, they get involved in chasing those big projects, the corporate headquarters, the $500 million manufacturing facilities, and they should, because those are important. You go right down the road in Sanford, you've got a $500 million Pfizer plant under construction. Those are important, but who's looking out for the more rural communities? Who's helping chase those? Because sometimes those decisions that are made by the companies of where to locate, whether they locate in this state or another state, it comes down to how they felt about their visits, how much they felt wanted there. And sometimes it really comes down to as simple as that and as subjective as that. And I think the Lieutenant Governor can play a key role as being an advocate for those rural communities where a 100-person job, manufacturing job provider, that's a huge impact for a rural community. So I'd like to be the champion for rural economic development as Lieutenant Governor, and I think I can play a big role in that.
Thank you. Candidate Bingle, same question, 3 minutes.
Well, thank you all very much for being here, and I want to talk to you a little bit today about my story. And my story started on September 14th, 2018, when Hurricane Florence dumped 8 trillion gallons of water on eastern North Carolina in my hometown of Newburgh. I saw streets flooded. I saw people flooded out of their homes. People lost everything. Friends, family, people lost everything. I saw chaos in our streets. I saw people that didn't know what to do. And they needed a leader. They needed someone that would stand up and take the reins amidst all the craziness. And that was when I knew I needed to stand up and act. I needed to lead. And the Republican Party needed a leader. And we got one in Donald Trump. Donald Trump was a business owner that had never been in politics before. Our Lieutenant Governor was a business owner that had never been in politics before. We need good, strong business leaders that understand how to build companies, understand how to build things, and sometimes take them that when they're falling apart and know how to put the pieces back together. As Lieutenant Governor, you have a mouthpiece. You can talk about things. You have a pulpit to go in front of crowds just like this and talk about how you can make a difference, how you can help create opportunity. And when I look at opportunity, I think about opportunity not just in the business world, not just how we can create jobs and how we can talk to a CEO one-on-one about why we need to bring companies to North Carolina to help expand higher paying jobs here, but we can talk about opportunity in education. We can talk about things like the Opportunity Scholarship. We can talk about things that will help families across North Carolina make a better living for their kids than they've had themselves. We need to find ways that we can continue to go across North Carolina, someone that will roll their sleeves up and know that when times of crisis come, that you will have a leader that will stand up. It's time for my generation, the next generation, to stand up. I'm thankful for the people who've helped build the bridge in North Carolina, who've helped get us to where we're at. But now that work has been done, and we need a leader that will continue to carry it on, that can go down the education spectrum, that can talk about the business spectrum, and has a wide background. And as you'll hear tonight, I have a very diverse background, from sports and entertainment to restaurants, from nonprofit work in hospitals all the way up to economic development boards. North Carolina needs that leader that's ready to stand up and act, and I will be that leader.
Thank you. Candidate Cochran, 3 minutes, same question.
Thank you so much, and thanks to each of you for being here tonight. I know there are always so many events vying for our time. If you were to list the qualifications for the ideal candidate for Lieutenant Governor, I am specifically qualified. I have executive experience. I am a two-term mayor in my hometown of Mount Airy, North Carolina. I served from 2009 until 2015, presiding over the meetings. The Lieutenant Governor presides over the Senate meetings. As Lieutenant Governor Dan Forrest said moments ago, the Lieutenant Governor is appointed to the Board of Education. This is year 5 for me. I'm a business teacher in Winston-Salem. The Lieutenant Governor is also appointed to the Board of Community Colleges, and I worked 18 years part-time at a community college. I am a long-standing advocate of education. I am school choice. Parents know what is best for their children, not the state. I am also a strong supporter of apprenticeship programs, trade schools, and work-based programs, community colleges that teach a skill, and the measures that I will put into place will fill the skills gap. And also, we need to have commissions that help with the rigor and quality of education when it comes to math and English as well. So again, I am specifically qualified. Education is one of my main core values that I will focus on. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Gebhardt, same question, 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. It's good to be back home. For those of you who don't know, my name is Greg Gebhardt, and my high school sweetheart and I, Carrie, arrived in Harnett County back in 2008. We lived in Lillington while I was still on active duty at Fort Bragg, and so it's good to be back home. I think, if I'm not mistaken, this is the same auditorium I gave the commencement address to the Cape Fear Christian Academy a couple years ago. So it's good to be back home. You know, running for statewide office takes you all across the state, but it's always good to be back home. So thank you to the Harnett County GOP. Thank you to all my friends who are in the audience who brought me along in Republican Party politics here in North Carolina. It's good to be back with y'all. And, you know, Harnett County, my wife and I settled here because it reminded us a lot of where we grew up. As I said, Carrie and I are high school sweethearts. We've been together over 20 years, and we grew up in a very rural part of Pennsylvania. And so when we got stationed at Fort Bragg and we were deciding where to live, we found Harnett County, and we knew that Harnett County was home. So we started to raise our family here. We have 3 beautiful little girls. And so Harnett County, again, reminds us a lot of home. I grew up in a single-parent household. My mom raised 3 kids on $25,000 a year. My father wasn't really in my life because my parents got divorced when I was 5 years old. I don't tell you that for your sympathy. I tell you that because in today's day and age, that story is all too common, right? Over 50% of marriages end in divorce today. And so my mom did a great job as a single parent raising 3 kids on $25,000 a year, and I'm extremely proud of that. And I'm proud to stand before you tonight as a candidate for Lieutenant Governor in the greatest state in the nation. And so, Colonel West, I believe the question was, what is the most important duty or role that you see as a Lieutenant Governor? Well, Lieutenant Governor Dan Forrest just spoke about, he said a couple things, but he said some things that directly tie to this question, right? He said the office is one of the most misunderstood offices, and then he went on to list some of the things you do as a Lieutenant Governor. You sit on the Energy Policy Council, you sit on the Community College Board, and you sit on the State Board of Education. Well, why should y'all care that I want to be the Lieutenant Governor? Well, let's just talk about those 3 things. The State Board of Education. I was a substitute teacher here in Harnett County when I left active duty. I spent 2 years in the classroom as a substitute teacher right here in Harnett County. I've been in our schools. I've seen what goes on. Last year, I was the PTA president at my daughter's elementary school. I've been a PTA president. Again, our kids are in public school. We see what goes on in the schools. Community college boards. I met with the president of the community college system a couple weeks ago because I wanted to understand the role that the lieutenant governor played on that board. And then finally, Energy Policy Council. For the last 2 years, I've traveled the United States working for a leading energy company, and I'm proud to do that. So I would say, why should you care that I want to serve in this role? Well, I think you should care because I have qualifications that directly tie to this role, and I think the most important duty is you could cast the deciding vote in the Senate next year in a 25-25 Senate. Do you want a liberal socialist
Thank you,
doing that,
candidate
or do you want a
Gephardt.
conservative? Thank you.
Candidate Johnson, same question, 3 minutes.
Thank you, and thank you all for coming out tonight. This is really a testament for you taking your time to come learn about a lot of great candidates. And I think we're going to hear a lot of agreement tonight on a lot of key policies, which really indicates that we have a lot of strong candidates for this position. I'm fortunate to be able to be the last one to answer the question, but unfortunately that means because I am the very last person on the ballot after some very strong candidates. So let me tell you a little bit about me. I am the state superintendent. With your help, we were able to win that office for the first time in over 100 years. Because we said, just like we said for this nation, more of the same was not the only option for our education system. And it has been a fight. And that fight is why I'm ready to take it to the next level if you would be willing to have me as your candidate. Because before I even took office, elected by the people of North Carolina, the State Board of Education, a bunch of appointed people who only spend a day in Raleigh, used your taxpayer dollars to sue me to stop me from bringing the changes that I told you I was going to bring. Now, a lot of people who just got elected to a statewide office might have just gone along to get along. They might have said, okay, I'm in Raleigh, I've got the nice office, let's just play nice and I'll work with the state board. But we didn't have time to mess around like that. We didn't have time because we had too much testing, we had Common Core, we had, as has been noted earlier, we have indoctrination, and we also had for the past 10 years, education leaders telling students the only way to be successful is if you go to a four-year college. So we immediately started changing that. And one, it took pushing back and fighting. And thanks to the support of the General Assembly, we won that lawsuit, and we have reduced the size of the state education bureaucracy. We've made sure that any of your taxpayer dollars that go to education get to classrooms where they belong, and we've reduced testing. We've worked with the Lieutenant Governor's office to get financial literacy instruction into every high school. We're improving American history instruction, and we're talking about career pathways for students. We're letting students know that there's more than just going to a great four-year college to be a success. There's a credential, there's job skills training, there's community college, and there's the greatest job training program in the nation. That's our armed services. It has been a fight the whole time, and I have pushed back against the bureaucrats the entire time I've been in office. I hope I get a chance to talk about that more, but that is why I'm bringing this to the next level. The deep state in North Carolina is real, and the lieutenant governor said you get to write your own ticket as lieutenant governor. I am taking this fight to the administrative state that tries to take the laws from the General Assembly, skew them so that they can do what they want and tell you how you need to live your life. We need to change that. Our president's doing it, and we need to do it here in North Carolina too.
For our next question, we'll start with Mr. Robinson. We'll work it through so everybody will have a chance to go first, and everyone, as a result, will also have a chance to be last. So, as Lieutenant Governor, it's a separate, independent, elected office in North Carolina, one of 10 statewide executive branch offices. As the Lieutenant Governor mentioned, it's not widely understood, but you have to create something of an identity for yourself as Lieutenant Governor. These responses in 2 minutes list your top 3 priorities as Lieutenant Governor and what you will do specifically to get those accomplished in the office.
We'll set education aside for a minute because that's an actual duty. But as far as the agenda that I would like to push, the very first thing, folks, that I would like to do is to stand up for the lives of the unborn on the floor of that Senate. We have got to start standing up for the lives of the unborn in this state. We have got to make North Carolina a sanctuary state for the unborn. We see states becoming and cities becoming sanctuary cities for people who have come here illegally. We need to be a sanctuary state for the unborn and set that standard in this country. That's number one. Number two, Number two, we've got to stand up for our Second Amendment, folks, because without our Second Amendment, our Constitution will fall. And number three, we need to start standing up for our law enforcement officers and back them up as they do their job out on the streets and put their lives on the line. So those are the three agendas that I plan to push as Lieutenant Governor. Thank you.
It's always, we do this all the time where a lot of times I have to follow Mark. So it's always a challenge when you have to follow it. Well, there's three things that we had to answer. We will have to answer a million questionnaires during this run statewide. One of the things we asked for is what were three things we wanted to actually put in place, what piece of legislation. One that we need to do, and it's going to sound like I'm copying your answer, but we need to pass the protection for the unborn that was vetoed by Governor, the Born Alive bill. We need to pass that again next year. After we have a new governor, hopefully, and we hold majorities in the House and the Senate, we need to pass that again and it needs to become law. We also need to say the same thing that was vetoed as well, making sure that these 7 sanctuary sheriffs who refuse to cooperate with ICE, we need to pass that legislation again and make sure it's veto-proof, or ideally have our new governor who's not going to veto, who's going to sign it. Those are 2 things that we need to get done. And the third thing I'd like to do, which is completely different, which it actually draws a little bit more on my background as a business person. I have a company that I started from scratch about 7 years ago, 2 of us. Now we've got 55 employees. We've got 3 offices around from Charlotte, Virginia Beach, and Raleigh. We do work throughout the Southeast as an engineering firm. And growing that business from scratch as a small business and also working for national firms, I want to bring accountability and business-minded work and processes to state government, because it is incredibly inefficient. We still have fax machines as a way to communicate with state government. There are so many ways we can improve the efficiency and the accountability and the transparency of state government, and that's one of the things I look to lead on as your Lieutenant Governor.
Well, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get rid of our liberal governor. That's the first thing we got to do. And we're going to put a Republican in the governor's mansion. And then we're going to work with the governor. And we're going to work with the governor first on education. And I talked about it earlier. We're going to talk about opportunity scholarships. We need to expand that. Opportunity scholarships offer an opportunity for lower income families to send their child to private schools, to send them to charter schools. I believe in school choice. I trust parents. I want to make sure that our parents have the opportunity to do what's best for their children. And I will advocate every single day for those parents. We currently have a governor that does not trust parents, and he said it by his vetoes. He obviously doesn't trust women, because if he did, he would have never vetoed the Born Alive bill. The second thing we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about bringing jobs to North Carolina and looking at some of our rural areas. We're going to talk about land in North Carolina. North Carolina has tons of unused land. We need to sell that back and get it back on the tax rolls so we can start creating jobs. We can start putting that money back into our economies and back into our state. And we're going to make North Carolina the most military-friendly state in the country. And we're going to work every single day to talk about that. Our military and our veterans, first off, I want to say thank you to all the military and veterans in here. Thank you. God bless you for what you do for our country. And as the Lieutenant Governor, I will tell you, you will have a friend in the office of the Lieutenant Governor, and every single day we will advocate to make the lives better, not just for our service members, but for our veterans right here in North Carolina.
My 3 focuses, I alluded to education earlier. I would advocate having a computer science teacher in every school, qualified computer science teachers, because so many jobs are going to computers, especially if you've been keeping up with our Lieutenant Governor. 4th and 5th graders now, when they become adults, 70% of the jobs will require that. Also, economic development is extremely important to me. People need paychecks. And as mayor, I flew to West Memphis to recruit a California-based industry to my city to fill the largest empty building that used to be Bassett Furniture. And that company moved there without any subsidies. Also, I am for public safety. It's very important. As a female, I have my concealed carry. And also, I would support legislation compelling law enforcement to comply with the federal government. Economic development, keeping the taxes low. North Carolina now is one of the best states to do business. Agriculture is the #1 industry. I definitely understand that. I grew up on my uncle's dairy farm, spent a lot of time there. So definitely continuing the things that make North Carolina great.
So, 3 priorities, and what would I do specifically? The third one I had was something different, but in the last couple of days that changed because of course of events in the state. But 3 V's: vocational trades, veterans, and voter ID. Those are 3 things I would focus on as your lieutenant governor. Let's talk about veterans. I'm an Iraq War veteran. My family has proudly served this state and this nation our entire professional lives, from the day I enlisted in the Army at 18 to when I graduated and shook President George W. Bush's hand at West Point in 2006, to swearing into the North Carolina National Guard in 2012. Service is all my family knows to this nation, this state. So we need to do more to take care of our veterans. Specifically, we need to make retirement income for veterans in North Carolina tax-free. We're one of only 8 states that does nothing for veterans in terms of their retirement pay. Vocational trades. There's no reason why kids that leave high school should not have a certification from our community college system in the vocational trades. We have one of the best community college systems in the nation. It's okay if you don't want to go to college. I was led to believe that I needed to go to college to be successful in life, and all that did was put me $10,000 in debt, and that caused me to enlist in the United States Army. We need kids with certifications so they can become productive tax-paying citizens and contribute back to our society as a plumber, HVAC tech, certified nursing assistant, electrician, you name them, you know them all. There's no reason why we can't get those programs in our high schools. And finally, voter ID. I was blessed to work for this man right here, Representative David Lewis, back in 2013 when we passed the first voter ID bill. I stood out in the cold and the rain the other day in Winston-Salem because of one liberal activist judge overturned the will of over 2 million North Carolinians who want voter ID. I will use the office of the Lieutenant Governor to advocate every day for voter ID until that becomes enshrined in our Constitution and upheld by our courts. Thank you.
Thank you. A lot of amazing points, and I couldn't agree more with all the points made, and I think it shows that we have a lot to bring to the table. My 3, first and foremost, because of my experience as state superintendent, I know with what we've done for the education bureaucracy, we need to make more government more accountable to you, more transparent with you, and more efficient for you. We have gone in and found that there are bureaucrats who take the laws that are passed by the General Assembly and then skew them in order to make the laws what they want them to be. That is not how our Constitution works at the federal level or in the state level. And we see it going on right now in D.C. We see with the partisanship that is coming after our president, what is going on with the deep state really fighting for every scrap of power it can get. And that is what needs to be the top priority of this office. And I will work with the Republican governor, with the General Assembly, to go in and do that not just for the education bureaucracy, but for all the bureaucracies to make them more accountable. 2, we still need to get rid of Common Core. I am the state superintendent of public instruction. I stood with Lieutenant Governor Dan Forrest and told that state board, the people have spoken. We cannot have Common Core anymore in our schools. Luckily, Senator, when we get this veto override on this budget, because of my team and our work, we will have a program in place, thanks to that state budget, where local school districts can opt out of Common Core. But we need a lieutenant governor on that state board that is going to finish the fight and just get it out of North Carolina. You're going to see more from me on that in January and February because we're going to be talking a lot about what Florida's doing. And 3rd, we need government reform. We need government reform. We need to truly look at why we have so many cabinet agencies and what role they are playing, because they're taken away from the lawmakers and just legislating from the bureaucracy.
So, in answering that question, I would say first, and I'd say this is probably what I start with, no matter if it's in my law office or in the courtroom or serving in the church, in the community, wherever I'm blessed to have the opportunity to serve, I like to promote an environment of civility, of genuine care and concern for the individuals that I work with. And I think that in America today, we could use a good dose of that in all of our chambers and lawmaking bodies. So I would like to promote that and to bring that, and I'm thankful for the civility and the kindness and really the great camaraderie that this group of people on this stage shares, and that is genuine. It's been a blessing. So I'd start with that, but that doesn't mean that I wouldn't be firm and strong and true to my conservative values. I've heard some passionate responses, particularly about the unborn and the pro-life stances that we all share. I'm strong on that as well. Fiscal responsibility is so important. We need to be careful how we spend our money. So there's so many roles, especially on that the Lieutenant Governor can play to promote these conservative values, and I'd be strong on that. Secondly, I'm promoting trades and education, and that is really one issue along with the economy. I want to promote our strong economy. And yesterday I was privileged to be involved in a meeting in Randolph County where a veterans group there and some local citizens who have acted for veterans are looking to promote nationwide dental coverage for veterans. So veterans will also be important to me. Thank you.
Next question is a 2-minute question. We have all come to understand that one of the key roles, positions for the Lieutenant Governor of the great state of North Carolina is to be a member of the state school board. Let's talk specifically about some of the policies and the priorities that you would want to enact as a member of the state school board, but also let's talk about how do you see that relationship with the state superintendent of schools. And we will start off with candidate Stone.
Well, thank you. Let me start with the second part first. The Lieutenant Governor has got to be collaborative with the school board, with the Board of Education State Board, and with the superintendent. And I'm a little disappointed that we're going to have an uphill battle to hold that seat now, because we thought we had someone running for re-election, but now we have two candidates now, Republicans, that we hope they can win. But it is a little bit of a challenge. They're starting from scratch just a couple weeks before filing. But I will say that collaboration, not just with the superintendent, but with the whole board. I would say one of the things, though, on a policy perspective that I would like to work on is something that I was very proud to fight for in 2016. It was one of the very first speeches I gave in the House floor, and it had to do with achievement school districts. And achievement school districts, which is now they're called innovative school districts. Achievement school districts were basically you took 5 of the 50 worst performing schools in the state. And it was a lifeline. It allowed charter schools to come in and add a lifeline for those individual schools. The legislation that we passed would have required 5 schools to be opened and running by this school year, 2019. Unfortunately, though, we only have 1 up and running. I know the law has changed a couple times, including this year. It was tweaked again. But this is so important because these kids, every year that goes by, where they're in a failing school, I mean really failing school, they're being left behind. And they're losing a year of education that they deserve better, and that's why we couldn't wait any longer. So I want to see that accelerated. I want to see that lifeline come to those students who are desperate for a good education. So that's one thing I'd work on.
Thank you. Candidate Bingle, same question, 2 minutes.
Well, I said it earlier, and I'll say it again. I trust parents. I'll say it again. I trust parents. I believe in school choice, and I will advocate every single day to make sure that we can expand on school choice. So that parent that has that child that may be a special needs child, or maybe coming from a small rural county where they can't afford to send their child to some school, that they will have an opportunity for that child to have an education. I'll work every day to talk about how we can expand the Opportunity Scholarship, to get it from $4,200 up to about $6,200, or even work as a percentage of what we spend on our kids right now in public schools, because I believe that's important. I think that's an issue we need to talk about every single day, and as a lieutenant governor, I will. Another issue that's extremely important is talking about making sure that our children are safe. Unfortunately, we've seen too many atrocities in this country, and I'll work every day to make sure we have SROs in every single school, starting with our preschools all the way up to our high schools, to make sure that when that mother drops her 5 or 6-year-old kid off at kindergarten, she never has to worry that something's going to happen to that child. She knows that there's somebody in that school armed and ready that if somebody walks in to take that perpetrator down. And I will make sure every single day we advocate for that. And sitting on the school board, I will make sure to work with our school superintendent, which will be a Republican. We're going to elect Republicans across the board, and we will make changes in education to make North Carolina the leader in education.
Candidate Cochran.
Thank you. Developing strong relationships is very important to me. So definitely I would meet with the superintendent of public instruction, whomever that may be. Also to appoint a commission charged to end Common Core and increase the rigor of math and language arts, as I said earlier. There's also a skill shortage in STEM. We're talking about science, technology, education, and math, and as I alluded to earlier, definitely make sure that all schools have computer science teachers and working computers. And school safety is very important to me as well, having an SRO officer in all of the schools.
So school safety is near and dear to my heart. My sister back in 1998 was at a middle school dance in Pennsylvania when my 8th grade science teacher was shot and killed. Fortunately for me, I wasn't there, but unfortunately it impacted my family. My father was the volunteer fire chief in our town at the time as well. So school safety is obviously near and dear to my heart. And so the specific policy that I would work on as the lieutenant governor would be ensuring the safety of our students in our schools. When I put right now we only have 2 of our 3 little girls in the public school system, but when I put those 2 girls on the bus every morning, it never crosses my mind that they might not get off the bus in the afternoon. And I'm sure I'm not the only parent that it doesn't cross their mind until it happens, right? Well, what can we do to prevent it from happening? As someone who's running for elected office, I'm not going to stand up here and pretend that I have all the answers. I met a gentleman a couple weeks ago at a lunch in Winston-Salem. That gentleman's in the audience right now. He's a retired Command Sergeant Major. His area of expertise is personal safety. We had a 30-minute discussion that day. I won't mention his name because he probably doesn't want me to mention him by name, but he's running for school board in his community. See, that's what veterans do. They come back and they want to continue to serve. But me and this gentleman had a long conversation about school safety, and he said, Greg, if you win this thing and you take on any issues with school safety, please, I'd love to help you. And I can tell you, as your lieutenant governor, I would not purport to have all the answers, but I'd be smart enough to go to people like that gentleman who do have the answers. So school safety would be near and dear to my heart. Thank you.
This is where the rubber hits the road. This is where you're really going to see why I've made the decision to run for lieutenant governor. First, let me give a huge shout out to our General Assembly members who have invested hundreds of millions of dollars into school safety over the past 2 years without raising your taxes, that have gotten more mental health supports into our schools, that have gotten more school resource officers into our schools, and we've done that by working together. But guess who didn't work with us? The State Board of Education. The State Board of Education, as soon as the General Assembly saw an opportunity to make the education bureaucracy more efficient, more accountable, and they changed the authority from the State Board of Education, a board that was just protecting bureaucrats, to me, who was going to go in and clean out the bureaucracy, the State Board of Education spent hundreds of thousands of your taxpayer dollars that were supposed to support classrooms to pay for private lawyers in courtrooms to sue until it was blue to try to hold up those changes. Now, you got to ask yourself, do you want someone who's going to go try to hold hands with the State Board of Education and skip across the finish line together? Because they will drag it out. In Raleigh, the bureaucrats, it's the turtle. They put their head in their shell and they try to wait 4 years until the Republican's no longer in office. And I didn't wait around. I could have just been state superintendent and driven around the state and done photo ops, but I brought the fight to the State Board of Education, and our education bureaucracy is a better place now because of it. So I want to be the lieutenant governor because I want to be on the state board, and I want to continue that fight against the State Board of Education, which now is predominantly appointed by Governor Roy Cooper. So don't tell me you're going to be lieutenant governor and go working with the State Board of Education, because it's going to take someone to fight the people who want to keep things the same and protect the status quo. That's what we need as lieutenant governor.
As I've mentioned, one of my major platform areas is going to be promoting trades education. And what we have already in North Carolina, in our high schools and particularly our community colleges, is a collaboration between the two where students can get college credits while they're in high school and save tremendously on their education, or be that much further prepared when they do go to college. That's one area that I think needs to be continued to be promoted, and make sure that there is knowledge and information out there for the young people who are in high school now, so that they know that they have these opportunities. But we also need to provide a good, solid education in our primary and secondary schools, in our high schools, so that when students do leave from high school, that they do have the skills that they need to be successful in life. Of course, that begins with solid reading and math skills, but also practical skills like being able to balance a checkbook and being able to budget and being prepared. Some of those things they could even use in college while they're there and make better decisions. So I think that there are certain practical skills that we could focus on that would be helpful, and also that we could provide for many of the skills that would be needed for young people to enter into trade careers right out of high school or with very little additional education, and they can get some high-paying jobs and go ahead and be part of this great economy. And so I think that that would be some areas of focus for me in particular as Lieutenant Governor. I would like to promote the trades and just the connection between our high schools and our community colleges, and just to make sure that people are aware of what we already have. We don't always need to spend more money or to create new programs. Sometimes we just need to know about what we already have.
Thank you.
Well, for me in education, it's not so much about the policy, it's about the persuasion. And here's what the persuasion that I want to do when I go into the Lieutenant Governor's office. I want to ask the state school board, not ask the state school board, I want to demand the state school board that our schools stop indoctrinating our children, period. You've got to stop it. Stop indoctrinating our children and just teach them. Just teach them, that's it. Stop forcing Marxism and communism down their throats and just teach them. Stop teaching them about gender fluidity and stop presenting pornographic so-called sexual education to them and just teach them. Teach them reading, writing, and arithmetic and just teach them. Stop indoctrinating them and just teach them. That is exactly what I want to do on the state school board. I want to make them just teach our children and stop indoctrinating them.
Our next question, also 2 minutes. We'll start with candidate Bengal. Economic development is an important issue for the state of North Carolina. We're increasingly in competition in a global economy. We've been cited by many publications over the last several years as a desired destination for businesses. As Lieutenant Governor, for all of the candidates here, what will be your priorities in terms of keeping North Carolina competitive in this global economy that we'll face in the coming decades?
Well, to answer your question, it takes a business leader to understand how to recruit and retain a company. I've been very fortunate throughout my career to start different types of companies, from owning a baseball franchise to a sports consulting firm to different restaurants. And understanding the metrics of what it takes, how to create a budget, how to create jobs. And not just how to create jobs when you have 60 people a day coming to Raleigh, but how to create a job at a small rural town like New Bern, North Carolina. Understanding when 60 people a day aren't moving there. And you have to understand how to, we need to expand companies. We need to bring things to us. So it takes a business leader that understands, the business background. And as Lieutenant Governor, I want to help create those opportunities here in North Carolina. I want to be able to create, our legislator has done a great job of making the restrictions on businesses go away. We've gone from one of the average states to doing businesses to most recently the #1 state by Forbes to do business. But one of the things we lack is access to capital. We have to find ways to help fund some of these projects. I think back to that young Marine coming out of Marine Corps Cherry Point who has an expertise in working on HVAC units. And he wants to start a company when he gets done with his service. And he has to think, well, do I stay in North Carolina or do I go back home to Virginia or Florida, whatever state? I want to work with our state to find ways that we can help create capital to keep that young Marine and his family right here in North Carolina. We have to find new ways to create jobs, not just in our urban economies, but in our rural as well. And it takes a business leader to do that. You've seen it with the White House with President Trump. You've seen it with our current Lieutenant Governor, Dan Forest, and I will do the exact same thing as the next Lieutenant Governor.
When I ran for city commissioner in my hometown of Mount Airy, North Carolina, and also mayor, I always kept my word. I have a proven fiscally conservative record. Under my leadership, we lowered property taxes 30%. We have to keep taxes low so businesses will want to locate in our state. The corporate tax rate is great in North Carolina as well. We have to work on that and also abolish laws that are not business friendly. Business is the lifeblood of the community. As a business teacher, I talk with my students day in and day out about the importance of business and being self-sufficient, getting a paycheck. That is so important. It translates into dollars in the community, and it helps everyone. So I'm very passionate about economic development, and again, I flew to West Memphis to recruit a company, and I dealt with a lot of other companies as mayor, and it is definitely one of my #1 core values, economic development. I come from a town where we lost thousands of jobs. They moved overseas and offshore, and my brother was one of those young men that lost his job, and my mother as well. So I know the impact it has in a family. So definitely economic development, keeping people working.
So I told y'all earlier why my wife and I settled in Harnett County, because it reminded us a lot of home. And unfortunately, where I grew up, there was not a lot of economic opportunity back home. And that's one of the reasons why I left and enlisted in the Army. But the point being is, what are we doing in North Carolina for rural North Carolina? The large urban and metro areas, the Charlottes, the Raleighs, they're going to continue to do well, right? Because all these Yankees moving down from the north, bringing their liberal agendas with them, but they're going to continue to do well. But what are we doing for rural North Carolina? I was fortunate enough when I worked in the General Assembly as a staffer to work on reforming the tax code, both the corporate tax code and the personal tax code. You know, that tax code that Roy Cooper loves to bash, but then he stands at all the ribbon cuttings and takes all the credit for the hard work that these men in this front row have done to put this state back on track. We need more of those ribbon cuttings. And specifically, what would I do in terms of economic development? A couple months ago, I was in Davidson County, and they were telling me about this Eggers plant. This Eggers plant is a furniture maker from overseas, and they brought a nearly $1 billion investment to Davidson County. And Davidson County is becoming more urban, but it's a rural county, right? Well, it was a collaboration between the public sector, you had the economic development in the community, you had the county commissioners in the community, you had the Department of Commerce involved, you had all these places involved, and then you had the private sector involved. So what would I do? I would collaborate with all those organizations, both public and private, so that we can bring good paying jobs to rural North Carolina, because rural North Carolina is going to determine how fast North Carolina moves. And we need to get away from this mindset that if one county over here lands this large manufacturer, that the other county isn't going to benefit. It's the exact opposite. Rising tides floats all ships. So if we can land a large manufacturer in a rural county, it will benefit all the rural counties around there. And as a kid who grew up in rural America, that's where my heart is, and that is going to determine how far and how fast North Carolina moves.
let me start by saying huge thanks again to the General Assembly and our former governor, Pat McCrory, because together they inherited one of the worst economies we've ever had, and they've turned it into one of the best economies we've ever had. And that's because of their conservative policies to reduce taxes, reduce restrictions, and that brought the businesses. So one major theme you're getting from the role of Lieutenant Governor that I think we all agree on is how important this voice will be for education. Because when I talk about career development now and bringing in the jobs, it ties back to education now, because we've got the business climate. We're one of the best states in the nation now for businesses, and businesses are booming, but they don't have the skilled workforce. So what we've done out of the Office of the State Superintendent is we've already launched a group of education leaders, myself, the president of the UNC system, the president of the community college system, and other education leaders. We've joined up with businesses and nonprofit leaders, and we've launched an initiative so that we are going to go out across the entire state, and we are actually going to let students know that there are all these amazing jobs waiting for you, but they don't necessarily go through a four-year college. If you want to go to a four-year college and you have a plan, that's great. But we want you to have a career pathway for you, whether that's through our armed forces or whether that's through community college. Best example is I'm working with Lieutenant Governor on our computer science plan. There are 20,000 open jobs right now in North Carolina that have something to do with computer science, worth over $1 billion in salaries that we're not even using. We need to connect students to those jobs, and guess what? They're not all in Raleigh, they're not all in Charlotte. Computers are changing the world, and that's in rural North Carolina too. Those jobs are open. We need to connect students to it. We've started the work. I'm going to continue leading that work.
Well, most definitely, the conservative policies that have been promoted and voted in North Carolina over the last decade have certainly helped our business climate, and it's that kind of legislation that is really the key role. So as Lieutenant Governor, I would certainly want to work with our Republican legislators to promote fiscally conservative policies that in the end, you know, this little tax reduction here or this little reduction of red tape there promotes and brings in great businesses that actually creates more revenue for the state so that we can pay for this education system that we're wanting to improve and hoping to do well with. And so I certainly would say that I would propose and promote and get behind the legislators in their wonderful conservative policies that help bring in the business. I also agree that we do need a skilled workforce, and certainly I think that my platform for trades would help that endeavor, because we are losing a lot of our skilled workers. A lot of them are now approaching retirement, and we certainly need young people to replace them so that we will be prepared for the future and for all the jobs that we're wanting to create. But at the bottom and the heart of our economy, whether it's global or whatever, is still the heart is small business. So we need to prepare people to be able to be successful and to be entrepreneurs and to endeavor into their own small businesses, because that is certainly still the heart of our economy. And I would have a heart for the small businesses, for our farmers, for our rural areas. Would not want to forget them in all of this global economy.
Economic development and growth and job retention is something that's close to me because, folks, I've lost 2 jobs, 2 very good manufacturing jobs to NAFTA. I know what it's like to watch people lose their livelihood because of bad federal policy, so I know what that's like. But I think the most important thing as Lieutenant Governor that I can do, stand behind the legislature as they continue to use solid conservative economic principles to build economic growth through drawing in the private sector with tax cuts, corporate tax cuts, and personal income tax cuts. Those things draw business in for the long term. That's what we need. The second thing, of course, is being on that state school board. And again, folks, it all starts with education. We can bring in all the companies we want, but if we don't have people to fill the jobs, they're not going to stay. We need a solid, educated workforce, and it starts, folks, not in the 12th grade. It starts at grade 1 with teaching these kids how to read, how to write, how to do arithmetic, and then farther on to teach them how to gain skills that are going to bring them into these jobs and fill these jobs and keep them here for many years to come. So those are the two things that I would focus on as Lieutenant Governor. Standing behind the legislature as they continue to push those strong economic policies, and standing up for our children by ending indoctrination and getting back to education.
Well, so having been a member of the legislature, I would like to say that I'd like to bring that experience to working with the legislature and helping lead in the legislature to continue some of the policies that I've been proud to have been involved in over the last few years. And I've also been a business leader. I've been creating jobs in this state for the last 20 years, having been signing the front of a paycheck more than the back of a paycheck, and doing that hard work of creating those jobs personally. But I think it's important to know why we are where we are. Why are we seeing the success that we're seeing today? Because governments and economic development, it's a free market economy just like everything else is. People can make decisions based on choices, based on the different options that are available to them. As a business owner, I have a Virginia Beach office. With a new Democratic legislature in Virginia, I am very concerned with their Democratic governor and with them getting more and more liberal, how that's going to impact my company in our Virginia Beach office. And I'll make business decisions based on those policies, and that's what everybody does. They make those decisions based on that. And it's important to know where we came from, though. We were, before we took over the House and the Senate, and I wasn't there at the very beginning, so I don't want to take credit for some of the great work that others had done before me, but we went from one of the highest tax states to now one of the lowest tax states. The red tape is obviously a big part of it, but just the cost of doing business, that makes a huge difference. And that's why companies are coming here. And when I was voting on budgets that was lowering taxes, I kept hearing from the Charlotte Observer back home that, oh, this is going to cause all kinds of problems. It never did. It kept creating more revenues. We have a $900 million surplus because of it this past year. It's because of the great work that's been done. And we've got to continue to do that good work. That's why you're seeing corporate headquarters like Honeywell moving to Charlotte, Pfizer bringing a $500 million manufacturing plant to Sanford, because of where we are and because of the great work that's done. And I want to keep helping lead on those issues. Thank you.
In the audience tonight is my former brigade commander, Colonel Denny R. Lewis, and also my former brigade executive officer, Lieutenant Colonel Charles Powers. We all came in together. I was the brigade operations officer, brand new. One of the important things about the cycle of a unit or an organization is a smooth continuum of leadership. So my question to you is, give us an idea about your philosophy of leadership, and then also, what are the current policy positions of the Lieutenant Governor Forrest that you will seek to improve and sustain?
Thank you so much. Definitely a great leader has servant leadership. I'm a lifelong member of the Salvation Army. I believe in Christ, the hope of glory. I've flown to Florida to help with hurricane victims. So it is about giving glory to others, not yourself. So that is what I see a leader as being a servant. Dan Forrest has done a magnificent job in office. I've already met with some folks in education. I would definitely bring my being on the front lines of education to the office, so some things could be brought out that maybe, unless you're in the position day in, day out, you have to discover for yourself to really know. So that would be something that I would definitely do, is work on the education. And again, a leader puts other people first.
So, great question. More than happy to answer it. I told you how I grew up, and I never thought I'd stand before an audience like this and get to talk about how only in America can a kid grow up like I did and go on to graduate from West Point, the premier leadership institution in our country. I was blessed as an enlisted soldier with that opportunity. So Having been molded at the premier leadership institution in our country, I think the most enduring trait that we seek in leaders is humility, right? Everyone knows the leader that wants all the credit and says me, but we could all use an ounce of humility in our lives. As a company commander in Iraq, I had the fortune of leading 225 paratroopers on a year-long deployment. And short of marrying my high school sweetheart, it's the highest honor of my life. I'd do it again tomorrow. In fact, if my National Guard unit got called up to go to Iran or wherever they're sending these soldiers out of Fort Bragg, I'd leave tomorrow and wouldn't think twice about it. But you need a leader who's humble. I think President Reagan said it's amazing what we can accomplish when no one cares who gets credit, or something to that effect. And so I think humility is the trait that you seek in a leader. And in terms of our current Lieutenant Governor, Dan Forrest, many in the audience know, some of you might not know, I was Dan's Harnett County Chair in 2012. When I left active duty military in the summer of 2012, I delivered Harnett County for Dan in the primary, the runoff, and the general election. So I know Dan very well. Dan is a consensus builder. Dan is a team builder. And when I met with Hal and Dan months before announcing my candidacy, I was impressed about everything they said about building a team and running as a slate once we get through the primary. Thank you.
My style of leadership is I want to get the job done, and I want to do it with urgency. Because for 40 years, especially with our education system, we have just been slugging through more of the same, and we've been expecting different results with more of the same and the status quo. And here's what they do to you in Raleigh. And you got to be ready for this, whoever one of us is going to be lieutenant governor. You got to be ready, because when you go to Raleigh and you actually try to do what the people of North Carolina send you to do, not only does the left come after you, but so does the media. And the media just parades you week after week after week. Not here, of course, though. This is Raleigh. And it is something where they want you to slow down and to say, okay, we're going to build a coalition. Well, how's that coalition going for our very good state budget right now? Right? We have a really good state budget that increases compensation for educators, that fulfills the need of students who can't pay for their own school lunches. The state is using funds to help them pay those meals in this budget. It gives money to districts like Harnett County right here to build much-needed school facilities with state funds if the locals can't raise it themselves. That's all in the state budget, and we still don't have a state budget. So you need someone who is willing to take the fight and get the job done. What will I continue with Dan Forrest? What we've already been working on. Financial literacy for every high school student. Computer science opportunities for every high school student. Improving American history. And my hope is that on election night later this year, he's standing there as governor-elect, I'm standing there as lieutenant governor-elect. I'll immediately turn to him and say, all right, who are we going to appoint as these cabinet secretaries? Because we got some bureaucracies to go clean out.
So I've been paying close attention for the past several years and really looking at what our leaders have been doing, and I've been very pleased with our Republican legislature and the great successes that they have had. And I don't know if everyone realizes that they are bringing in surpluses and that there is just great work being done. Our state is in so much better of a fiscal and financial position now than it was in the past. It's a great blessing for our state. And also, one of the reasons that I wanted to run for lieutenant governor is because I believed and could see the great work that Dan Forrest has been doing. And I wanted to see a good conservative person in that office to continue that work. And that is what I intend to do when I serve as your next lieutenant governor. I will say also that I will have one, I think, distinct advantage over our current Lieutenant Governor Dan Forrest, at least in his last term, And I think that will be that I'll be serving under Governor Dan Forrest. So that will be a great advantage for me, and I would look forward to working with him because he has an agenda and a platform and a background that I can agree with and believe in and get behind and support. And I would just cherish the opportunity to work alongside him to promote these great conservative values and to serve the wonderful people of this state that I love so much.
Well, first off, let me say this. The very first thing we need to realize as elected officials is this: we're not leaders. We're not leaders. We're supposed to be servants. That's what the founding fathers intended. They did not intend us to be leaders. They intended us to be servants to the people, and that's what I want to be if I'm elected to be lieutenant governor. I want to be able to live out that creed that we learned in the Army, to not do anything that you aren't willing to do for the people that you're serving, to take the arrows, to take the hits, to take the fight, take it on yourself. That's what being a servant means. Not a leader, a servant, because that's what elected officials are supposed to be in this nation. They're supposed to be servants, first and foremost. And as far as carrying on what Dan Forrest is doing as lieutenant governor, I think the best thing that I can do is to step in that office and continue what he started as being a pro-life, pro-Second Amendment, pro-constitutional, principled conservative. That's the best thing I can do.
Well, the question really, it started with what is your philosophy on leadership? So, I bring from a lot of different places for my leadership examples come from. And one of them is, and particularly in my business, I do this, is surround yourself with the best and the brightest. A lot of times people who are leaders or in big senior roles in different places, they surround themselves with people who are going to support them and say yes to them and try to protect them. That is not what a leader should be, or it's really not a great way to be effective. If you surround yourself with the best and the brightest who will challenge you, not just listen and nod their head. They've got to be willing to challenge you respectfully and appropriately, but they've got to challenge what you're saying, because if they don't, what's the point of having them around you? You've got to have those smart people who might have a different opinion. And so that's one of the things that I try to do, of course, leading by example. And it's amazing. I look at leadership and I think about how do you get things accomplished. It's amazing what you can get accomplished if you don't worry about who gets the credit for it. And that, I think, can be the biggest thing. And too often in politics, not just in our state, but everywhere and across the country, everyone wants to get credit for things, and that's more important to them than what actually gets accomplished. So we've got to look at the end game of making sure that we're there to do the people's business and to lead the way they want us to lead. Let me talk about Dan Forrest a little bit, what he's done well. He's been a great conservative leader on a lot of great conservative issues, and so I think that's a way we can continue to see that role. I can hit the ground running on day one, serving as the president of the Senate, having been in the legislature. That's a big part of it. But one thing that I think can be done a little differently in the role is we as a party need a better message sometimes. We have great policies, but we don't tell people about them. And I'd like to, as lieutenant governor, have that be one of the things that I do, is to help tell our story. If you ask the average person, they think we've cut teacher pay and raised taxes when we've done the opposite. It's because we don't tell our story enough. And that's one of the things as lieutenant governor I want to do. I want to help be a messenger for our state.
When I think about my philosophy on leadership, leadership is not something that you do to somebody. And I think back to September 14th, and some friends, storm waters were starting to rise. It was the first day of the storm. I remember going through a very low-lying, low-income area. My truck, water was about halfway up the door, pulling up to this lady's house and knocking on her door. And it was the saddest thing in the world I've seen. Water's coming in her front porch, and she didn't want to leave. She had her cats, she had her clothes. She didn't want to get out of her house. And we kept saying, ma'am, if you don't leave now, you're going to be underwater in a few hours. It was not something that we were asked to do or we were told to do, but we felt it was right to go help somebody that couldn't help themselves. That's leadership. Being able to roll your sleeves up and take action, to see something before it's happening, to throw yourself in the middle of a situation. I think that's what our men and women of armed services, Lieutenant Colonel, you did that every day of your career. You put yourself in harm's way. You took action. And as Lieutenant Governor, I will roll my sleeves up every single day and take action. And we talk about our current Lieutenant Governor. One of the things I admire about him is his hustle. The man works more than anybody that I've seen. He's going all across the state, and he did it not just on his campaign, but he did it as Lieutenant Governor. When we talk about some issues that he has, I talked about the Opportunity Scholarship and championing issues like that to make sure that our kids' future is better than ours. You know, my generation is the first generation that's going to make less than my parents. We need to make sure that our kids' generation does not follow that. And I want to make sure, finally, that we have a business owner in the Lieutenant Governor's office that understands how to run a business and will run that with good conservative values.
All right, this is the second to last question, but before we get to that, I want to take a moment of personal privilege and say what an honor it's been to share the stage with you, Lieutenant Colonel, a true patriot and leader. Thank you, sir. Pleasure. One of the duties that the Lieutenant Governor currently holds, Dan Forrest, is the chair of the Energy Policy Council. And so as Lieutenant Governor, what will be your priorities in terms of leading North Carolina, in terms of the necessary energy generation that we'll need for the economy of the 21st century, for manufacturing, for our homes, for our families? What will be the necessary policies to make sure North Carolina has energy for its future? Candidate Gephardt, you start.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that question. Having worked for a renewable energy company for 3 years, I'm very well versed in energy policy here in North Carolina. And for those of you who might not know, North Carolina is actually the #2 state for installed solar capacity in the United States. North Carolina. You might expect it to be somewhere like Texas or Arizona. The #1 state is California. But, so energy policy, my wife and I live just down the road from Sharon Harris, the nuclear power plant in Wake County. So my policy would be an all-the-above policy, whether that be natural gas, renewables, you name it, an all-the-above policy. And an all-the-above policy where everyone competes on an even playing field. The public sector, the private sector, the regulated monopoly, that is Duke Energy in this state. Duke Energy, kudos to them for just yesterday agreeing to clean up all the coal ash across North Carolina. But one thing that doesn't get talked about when we talk about cleaning up the coal ash is, as ratepayers in North Carolina, we benefited from years of low energy rates because we burned that coal. Now, we could have done a better job and had a plan for what happened at the end of the useful life cycle of that coal, but burning that coal kept energy rates low. And as Lieutenant Governor, it would be my focus to keep energy rates low through an all-the-above energy policy, whether that be renewables, like I said, natural gas, geothermal, you name it, an all-the-above policy where both private sector companies like the one I worked for and the regulated monopoly of Duke Energy can compete on a level playing field. See, that's what I did for the company. I fought for access to the market. All I asked was that our company had an opportunity as a private sector to compete with the monopoly-owned utility Duke on a fair level playing field. Again, all the above energy policy would be my policy as Lieutenant Governor.
I agree. Free market principles can help drive our energy sector. So the more free market principles we can get back into energy, the better we're going to get, because the free market will put out the best, most efficient, cheapest energy for us. But I do want to point out that it is important to plan for the future, because we do unfortunately have a mess now with these coal ash ponds that now we're going to have to pay for in our energy rates. One other specific thing that I'm watching very closely, and I know a lot of people in Raleigh are at least as well, and in Eastern North Carolina, is the natural gas pipeline that we need to get into Eastern North Carolina. That has been held up for far too long, and the reason that is so important is because when we talk about energy, it's not just what you're burning in your home, it's about what we need for that economic development. And economic development runs on energy. So in order to have the jobs that we want to come out to Eastern North Carolina, They need the power, and natural gas is that power for those plants that could come out, for those factories that could come out and bring high-paying jobs to Eastern North Carolina. So we've got to get to the bottom of what this whole mess is that the Cooper administration got us involved in, but we've also got to get that pipeline finished. I'll be very, very adamant about that and free market principles because energy is the way that we help North Carolina continue to grow. With a little bit of time, I will say transportation builds into that. The more independent we can be and not reliant on places like Iran, which we don't know where that's going or what's going to happen to our gas prices, the better we are. But that also means the smart investment that we have been making in building out our transportation system. It is how we also bring jobs out to Eastern North Carolina, is making sure we have the roads for the transportation that all our industry so desperately relies on.
You know, it's interesting, the experiences that we have going through life, and you never know what's going to be important to you at some point in the future. But I remember many conversations I had with Mr. Clausen Williams, who was my mentor in the law, as a great attorney. I worked with him for 5 years, and he had experience serving on the North Carolina Utilities Commission. So I've heard many stories about the regulations and the things that they did over the years, and how they worked so hard to set North Carolina on a solid path. And we have enjoyed some wonderful years of reasonable rates and good management of our energy resources. And yes, of course, we do have some issues there that are being corrected with the coal ash spill, but I believe we'll see through that, and things will get better. But we just need to keep a practical approach to our energy. And yes, I do believe that various options, not just getting all of our energy from one source, but multiple sources, some of which would be clean energy, would be important to our growth and development over time. And we also always want to keep an eye on our environment and make sure that things are done appropriately, and that's why we do have regulatory boards. But we also want to make sure that we bring in the new ideas, and just as has been stated with the pipeline as well, we need to have these options because it's going to give choice to our consumers and to our business community, and we want to have what we need in North Carolina to continue to thrive, to continue to enjoy reasonable rates, and to continue to have the energy that we will need to be successful in the future.
Well, the very first thing I would do is I would surround myself with some very good, strong, conservative energy experts. That would be number one. That would be the number one thing I would do, and I would do that because of this. If we're going to have success in energy and industry in this state and in this country, what we're going to have to do is protect ourselves against the globalist climate change cabal. We have got to keep them out of this state. We can do everything that we've said on this stage tonight about energy that we want to, but if we have these globalist climate change people stifling us at every turn and stopping industry and stopping our attempts to build our energy infrastructure, it's not going to work. So as Lieutenant Governor, that would be one of the things I would focus on most when it comes to energy, is keeping the climate change cabal out of this state, and if they are in this state, keeping them in chains.
I told you, it's hard to follow Mark when he's always got good answers. So energy is an important topic that I've had a lot of experience in, and one of the reasons when I was first joined the House a few years ago, I asked Representative Lewis to appoint me to the, we all get our choices of what committees we want to be on. One of the ones I wanted to be on was the House Energy and Public Utilities Committee, and that was because I have an engineering background, had some experience with energy specifically, and was proud to have served on that committee for several years. So know a lot of the state policies, and there's a lot to it. There's a lot to it of what goes on and what sets policy. And while Duke Energy is the biggest provider of energy in the state, they're not the only ones, because we've got a lot of great co-ops all across the state who are very important to the economic development fabric of this community, of all the communities that they serve. So we need to continue to have a diversity of sources of energy. And I would say one of the reasons that we have had strong economic development here and have had such low cost of energy here is because of our nuclear. We've got nuclear plants that serve a good chunk of this entire state. So that is why our rates are so much lower than so many other places in the state. But we've got to continue to ensure that our infrastructure gets built out in such a way that it is cost effective, and when those dollars are being invested in energy infrastructure, they go as far as they possibly can. One of the things that I see firsthand day to day in my business, and I've seen it in the legislature as well, and I've heard it from constituents, is the frustration they have in the permitting process. When you get bureaucracies involved, when you get regulators involved, they will slow things down unnecessarily just to make their own jobs look and seem more important when they don't have to all the time. We've got to do everything we can to streamline every single process when it comes to any kind of regulation in the state, and every regulator in the state who's overseeing any kind of construction, including, they're using the excuse of DEQ has been holding up through the governor's office, the pipeline. That is unnecessary and ridiculous, and there's so many examples of that all work hard.
Thank you.
We've heard some of the candidates talk a little bit about the pipeline, and I'll say this. If Governor McCrory did what Governor Cooper did, they'd have thrown him in jail. And I hope the legislature goes after Governor Cooper the way that they should for what he's done to the state of North Carolina. The second thing I think about growing up in a rural community, one of the things that's really important to us in New Bern is the fact that we own our own electric utility. It's a major advantage to us. It's an advantage that when a natural disaster comes, we get electricity a little bit faster. We don't have to wait on Duke Energy. I think about some places down in Carteret County at the coast. It takes them a little bit longer because they're sending trucks from other parts of the state all the way down east. I look at that as an advantage. As Lieutenant Governor, one of the things that we can work on is talking with municipalities about what they've done, about how they generate their power, and how they make sure that their constituents have electricity. I also think about another place that I like to call home, and that's the beautiful Crystal Coast. And we look up and down our eastern seaboard, and we talk about the waterways. And one of the things we've talked a little bit about is looking at offshore drilling. And to me, one of the things when I think about offshore drilling is we need to look at exploring. I'm not saying we need to go and start drilling, but we need to know what's out there. We need to know to make sure that someone from the state of Virginia or South Carolina isn't coming into our waters and taking what's ours. We need to make sure that we know what's in our waterways, and if we can find ways to produce oil, I don't know what's under there, but if we can find ways to produce things at a cheaper, more efficient rate without having to use taxpayer dollars, I will firmly advocate for those issues. Thank you.
Elected officials need to listen to business owners, and as mayor, we had a business in the industrial park that needed some natural gas. So immediately we went to a company and ran some lines there. We also got some solar farms there as well. I definitely am for bringing together a large and diverse group to study this, and also to make sure that North Carolinians are safe. We talked about the coal ash spill. And also, from what I've been reading and studying, we do have a lot of solar right now, so we might want to review those tax credits for solar.
This is the final question. It will serve as your summation, and it will be 3 minutes allocated to each and every one of you. On January of next year, 2021, you will find yourself as the lieutenant governor, and Dan Forrest is the governor. However, not soon after he takes the oath of office, the governor will have to leave office. Explain to the people here why you will be ready to step in to be the governor of the great state of North Carolina. We'll start with you, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you. That is an excellent question, because that ultimately is what lieutenant means, is stand in. You are there to be ready if that worst were to happen. First, I want to thank you all for moderating. This has been an excellent forum. I've been involved in many, and this was top-notch. And I just want to say I am extremely confident in our Republican candidates for lieutenant governor. I would be happy to support whoever makes it through this primary, because we have been very strong, all of us tonight, and there's a lot of agreement here. Thank you. Thank you to Harnett County Republican Party for hosting this. Thank you to Campbell University. This is something that it is an honor and a privilege, truly, to be a statewide elected leader. My grandfather grew up dirt poor. He grew up in a community where he didn't graduate high school, and he joined the armed forces, and he came back, and he pulled himself up by his bootstraps to provide a better life for his children and their children. And he instilled in us the importance of education and the importance of hard work. And because of that, it led to us doing well for ourselves, but also wanting to give back. That's why I went and taught at West Charlotte High School. I taught in one of the lowest performing high schools with the most challenges in our state. And that led me to want to run for school board, because I saw the problems of the policies that were affecting our schools. So I ran for school board in Winston-Salem, and then I heard about all the problems of the education bureaucracy, and I decided that I'd put my name on a ballot for an office that nobody thought a Republican could win, but I'd go out there and I'd give it my all, telling the people that if you elect me, I will do what I promise to do. That's also what our president has been doing. And I think that, not to get into the details of the day-to-day, yes, I would appoint conservative cabinet secretaries. Yes, we would look at government reform. Yes, we would work hand-in-hand with the General Assembly. But ultimately, what you need to know about me is that I am here to just help make the state a better place for my daughter and for her generation. This is personal to me. It is an honor and a privilege to serve as a statewide elected representative. I won't need on-the-job training because I've already led one of the largest bureaucracies and a state budget of where we spend close to $16 billion on education a year. I have that experience. This has been an important night for you to get to know why I am running for lieutenant governor. And yes, if that worst were to happen, I absolutely 100% would be ready to step into those shoes, which are big shoes to fill. Thank you all for coming out tonight.
Candidate Ritter.
Well, first of all, I would say to Governor Dan Forrest, looking ahead to the future in January, that he would be pleased to have me as his lieutenant governor, because every day I will be praying for his health and well-being. But all joking aside, I've on a very, very, very much smaller scale, I've actually been through a situation like that in my lifetime already. And as I mentioned, Mr. Clausen Williams, we shared an office in little West End, Moore County, North Carolina. He was a great mentor to me, and I learned so much from him. And he died suddenly of a heart attack. And so as a 29, 30-year-old young man, I guess maybe 30, who was still kind of learning the ropes on practicing law, I had choices to make, and I decided to step up to the challenge to wrap up his law practice and all of the work and effort and responsibility that required, and to stick in there and to keep the office open and to try to move forward as best as I possibly could. And now it's been almost 8 years, I think, since he passed, and I'm so thankful that the Lord has blessed me to be successful. Our office is stronger now than it has been in many years. We were in a bad economy then, so I'm thankful to President Trump as well, and how God has blessed him to bring us out of that. But things are going well, and it's worked out tremendously. And so I certainly respect the memory of Clausen Williams and thankful for what he did for me. And I'm thankful that God gave me the direction and the strength to stand up and continue on there and to work hard. And if, God forbid, I was in that situation, I would do the same thing for the state of North Carolina.
Well, for me, folks, it's simple. I don't want to sound arrogant, but I have a a deep sense of confidence in myself. And I have a deep sense of confidence in myself because I have an overwhelming faith in my Creator. I have an overwhelming and abiding faith in God. And if it was in His plan for me to have to step into the seat of the governor, I have no doubt that He would be right there guiding my hand and guiding my tongue and helping me to carry out that duty. So I don't fear that day if it should come because I know He'd be with me. And why do I know that? I know it because of the things that I've seen in life. I know what it's like, folks, to stand in the kitchen and open the cabinet and there's nothing in there to eat. I know what it's like to watch your mom crying as she's watching you ride off to go serve the country. Folks, I know what it's like to lose a job that you desperately needed to take care of your family, to watch that job be washed away, but to still stand strong on faith. And I know that a lot of people here in North Carolina know those things too. And because I know those things, folks, I just don't understand North Carolina. I am North Carolina. I'm in it in all of its forms. I love this state, and if I was put in a position to lead this state, I have no doubt that I could do it. With God as the wings the wind underneath my wings, and the wisdom in my head, I know that I could lead this state, folks. So I have no doubt. So if I was put in that position, absolutely, I'd be ready to meet that challenge.
Well, it's not an accident that I chose Lieutenant Governor to run for. When looking back, I've been looking at this a year and been running hard for almost a year now. And I looked at the role and what could I do in that role, but also I had to think about what could I step into that role today if I had to be governor, because that is what part of the job could be, is you step into that role tomorrow to become governor. And everything that's happened in my past up to this point, my legislative background, my business background, they've all prepared me for that opportunity, for that potential situation. So let me tell you what those are specifically. Being a business leader, I've run complex organizations that when you work for big companies, big global publicly traded companies, they feel like governments, they feel like bureaucracies. And having worked in a national role running a $40 million operation, that helps prepare you for the organizational challenges that are going to come from that kind of a leadership role. So that's important. But one of the other big challenges, though, is we have a $24 billion budget, a very complex state government, and knowing how that operates, knowing how it works, knowing where different things happen, knowing how to work with the legislature comes from having served in a legislature for several years, knowing the folks to go to. I'm so proud that so many, all across the state, the people that I served with in the House, many of them in the House and those in the Senate too, I've got people who all across the state who are supporting me for this office, which is very humbling because they're the ones that have seen me in action or work with me hand in hand. And so those, we've got a couple of dozen folks who have pledged to support my campaign for Lieutenant Governor. But knowing how everything works allows you to hit the ground running and not having that ramp up, because it is complex, it is complicated, and the better prepared you are, the better job you can do. I'd say one of the other things that has prepared me for this role, probably almost more than anything else, is being the father of my two daughters. They are North Carolina girls. This is all they've known. My oldest daughter will graduate from Chapel Hill this semester, which is really scary. And my youngest is at NC State. And my daughters have, children test you, they challenge you, they teach you, and it's why we serve. It's why we want to make North Carolina as great a state as possible for their future, for all of our kids' futures. And seeing them go through kindergarten all the way up through now college is giving me a wealth of experience on the education side, and just being a parent that is going to help prepare me for this as well. So I want to thank you all for being here tonight. I want to thank Campbell and Harnett County GOP for hosting this, and this has been great, and I look forward to meeting you all after.
If I'm asked to step in the role of governor, the first thing that you have to do is you have to have a vision. And one of the things that I get to do in my professional life is I get to build teams. I get to build a baseball team, which is actually kind of fun, to be honest with you. And when I think about building my baseball team, I think about culture, and I think about that vision. And both of those things are all about winning. And as the governor, I would build a team around winning. Seems like we have somebody else doing a lot of winning right now. And we'd be doing that right here in North Carolina. It would be a pro-job, pro-business approach. One of the things that we haven't talked a lot about tonight is the #1 industry in North Carolina, agriculture. And as the governor, I would stand up for guys like Representative Lewis and farmers just like you to say, I've got your back. And I'm going to stand up and make sure your farms can succeed and restaurants like mine have food in them and my chefs can prepare those. And without guys like you, we can't do that. And I'll stand up every single day for you guys. I'll stand up to make sure North Carolina is the most military-friendly state in the country. And we will have a team that's led with personal responsibility and personal accountability. And we will work together every single day, rolling our sleeves up, to make sure that North Carolina is a better state than when we got here. And if we're blessed to continue to have 2 terms, on day 1, if that happens on that first day, our first call will be to the White House. Say, Mr. President, I'm right there with you, and we're going to keep America great. Congratulations on your 2nd term. I thank you all for the opportunity to stand here. I'm humbled to have the opportunity to meet so many great people, hear so many great stories throughout the state of North Carolina, and I humbly ask for your vote and your support on March 3rd. Please feel free, if you have any other questions, we'll be happy to answer them after, or visit our webpage at buddyfornc.com or follow us on Facebook. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to come listen tonight.
Why will I be ready? I seek God's wisdom. When God guides, He provides. He also works through the hands and hearts of others. Actually, when I got out of politics and was enjoying being a full-time teacher, it was a teacher down the hall that suggested that I run for lieutenant governor. And I said, why, may I ask? And she said, because you have a heart for God and man. Experience matters. I bring history, leadership, servant leadership, also executive experience, and an educational background as well. I will listen to North Carolinians, and I will work hard. I love this state and the people who live in it, and I will be a conservative voice. And again, thank you so much for being with us tonight. God bless you all, and God bless President Trump in the United States of America.
You know, a couple times in my career, I've been asked to step into roles that maybe I wasn't ready to step into. As a young lieutenant, I was asked to be a general's aide. I carried the bag for a general at Fort Bragg for a year and a half. And then when it came time for me to transition out of the Army, my battalion commander came and tapped me on the shoulder and said, Greg, I need you to come to Iraq and command this company of paratroopers. I said, sir, I don't have the schooling. The military hasn't trained me. And he said, Greg, you don't need the school. It's time for you to step up and lead. And so what I would do if I was asked to serve as the governor in January of 2021, God forbid something happened to our Republican governor, I'd seek God's guidance. That's the first thing I'd do, just like I did with those other 2 instances where I was thrown into the fire, maybe a bit unsuspecting. But, you know, if this were to happen, it only underscores the importance of this race. See, we elect the governor and the lieutenant governor separately, right? But if we don't elect a Republican lieutenant governor to be Dan Forrest's lieutenant governor, then all this would be for naught, which is why I think we all need to elect the person who's the most competent, the most conservative, and the most committed. No one on this stage has put in the miles or knocked on the doors or made the phone calls that I have to get fellow conservatives elected. Since I left active duty in the summer of 2012, I've volunteered on countless campaigns across the state because I believe in the conservative cause. I believe in the Judeo-Christian values and the principles that this nation were founded on. And it's not just rhetoric with me. Just like service isn't rhetoric with me and my family, we've dedicated our entire lives to service. Getting Republicans elected is not rhetoric with me. Again, I've got a proven track record of doing that. I'm not going to stop fighting. I ask that you join us in this fight. And, you know, again, it's not about me. And I guess if I were asked to do this, to step into the role of governor on the first day as the lieutenant governor, I would thank God that I've traveled over 15,000 miles across this state and met North Carolinians from Cherokee to Currituck, because that's what the job of being the governor of the state of North Carolina is about. It's about being a person of the people, understanding the daily struggles, the trials, and the tribulations that average, everyday North Carolinians face. And I feel that my wife, Carrie, and I and our family have been blessed in ways beyond our wildest imaginations. And if we were called to serve as the governor, I feel as though we would be prepared. So I'd ask that you join us in this fight for lieutenant governor. You can find me on the web at jointeamgreg.com. And it's jointeamgreg.com for a reason. See, it's not greggebhart.com or Greg for NC or anything like that, because it's not about me, it's about we. So join the team and let's win this thing. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank you for having me here back in the great state of North Carolina to participate in this Lieutenant Governor Forum. Let me leave you with a couple of thoughts before we close this out. It was Plato who once said, one of the penalties for refusing to participate in politics is that you shall be governed by your inferiors. This is the reason why we are sitting here right now, why some 3,000 paratroopers were on Green Ramp and boarding airplanes, so that we can have this democracy, that we can have this freedom, that we can have this liberty. You have to participate in it. You have to be all in. You have to understand that your responsibilities as a citizen in the greatest nation that the world has ever known, the constitutional republic that we call home, these great United States of America, and then this great state of North Carolina. God bless you all. God bless North Carolina. And go out and make a difference for this state and for this country. Thank you so much.